So today we're diving into something that feels, I don't know, less like a topic and more like a collective condition. This relentless urge to always be productive. We live in a society that doesn't just encourage busyness, it almost treats it like a medal of honor. If your calendar isn't packed, if you're not constantly in motion, there's this underlying sense that you're failing or maybe lagging behind.
That feeling is just so pervasive, isn't it? And the sources we looked at really confirm that this constant activity, the scrolling, the planning, the sheer amount of output, it's become dangerously tangled up with our sense of who we are. As one psychological assessment or notes pointed out, for a lot of people, the fear is that if they stop doing, they might just start being.
So we've basically been trained to equate constant motion with our self-worth. It's just an exhausting feedback loop.
It is, and that really brings up the central question we want to explore in this deep dive. When we look at all this nonstop frenzy, is it true doing, or is it structurally a form of running? Running from silence, running from ourselves. Our mission today is to try and understand why stillness feels so radical, and what incredible knowledge is just waiting for us when we dare to slow down.
Okay, let's unpack that first part.
Yeah.
The illusion of flight. Because that fear of stopping is so deeply felt. You take a moment of quiet, maybe just 10 minutes without a phone or a task, and immediately this low-grade unease rushes in. Anxiety or restlessness or even this specific kind of loneliness. Why does silence feel so hostile?
Well, silence feels hostile because it strips away all of our protective layers, and it immediately exposes this inner mechanism that just resists stillness, and that's the ego.
Yeah.
Now, in the context of the psychological and philosophical texts we looked at, the ego isn't some kind of comic book villain. We need to see it more as a learned pattern, what one source beautifully called a reflexive knot of self-reference.
A knot of self-reference. Okay, so for someone listening, what's a simple real-time indicator that this knot is tightening?
Oh, it's that moment you finished a conversation and immediately start assessing your performance. Did I sound smart enough? Did I handle that meeting correctly? It's that constant internal narrator that frames everything back to me. And the core belief that keeps this pattern going is, well, it's terrifyingly simple. If I stop, if I face the emptiness, I will disappear.
And that's why we build those external structures, right? The endless tasks, the achievements, to prove we exist.
Exactly. The ego builds these external scaffolds of productivity specifically to avoid the mirror of quietude. And what we're ultimately running from isn't some massive trauma, but something much more ordinary, what the ancient texts call dukkha.
Is dukkha basically the chronic low-grade anxiety that's fueling our modern burnout epidemic?
That's a great modern parallel. Dukkha is often translated as suffering, but it's really more like unsatisfactoriness. It's that subtle, persistent ache of being human, that feeling that something's missing, or that whatever you just achieved, it wasn't quite enough. And busyness is the perfect way to mute that insistent message. If you're always chasing the next goal, you never have to sit with the feeling of the present one being, a little bit hollow.
So if we're using busyness to filter out discomfort, what happens when we try to stop filtering and just sit with the raw emotions?
The ego specifically avoids emotional rawness. It likes curated feelings, pride, a thrill, justified anger. But it panics when it's confronted with unfiltered sadness or that lingering shame or anxiety that just pulses in your chest without a clear external reason. It sees those raw feelings as proof that its fixed identity is flawed or under attack.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. People think the emotion is the problem. Like, I am sad, therefore I have to fix the sadness.
And this is where our source material just offers this profound reversal. Suffering isn't caused by the emotion itself. It's caused by our resistance to the emotion. So when anxiety comes up and we immediately judge it or suppress it or flee from it by grabbing our phone, that act of judging and fleeing creates an inner division. We split ourselves into the part that feels and the part that scolds or suppresses the feeling. That internal conflict, that resistance, is the true source of the pain.
The fight against the feeling is harder than the feeling itself.
So much harder. And if we can just step back and look at this resistance, we realize we're confusing the water with the turbulence. Think of the river image that was used in one of the texts. When a river rushes, the surface is churning. It's all motion and foam and spray. And we mistake that surface turbulence for the entire river.
But the turbulence is just obscuring the truth of the river's depth.
Precisely. When the current slows down in the water pools, it becomes calm. It reveals its depths. You can see the smooth stones, the reflections, the clarity. Our minds work in the exact same way. We need that slowness, that stillness, to reveal the true content of our being, instead of constantly mistaking the surface agitation for who we really are.
That analogy, that really lands hard. Okay, so if we recognize we're running and that the turbulence is masking our depths, what is the first radical step to stop the flight? I mean, do we have to actively fight the ego or force ourselves to be calm? Because that just sounds like another task.
And that's the critical insight here. The first radical step is to completely drop the idea of fixing. The goal is not to force the mind to be quiet. That's just another form of self-control, another scaffold. The goal is to change our relationship with what's in the mind. The key is focused attention, not effortful control.
But I worry that sounds passive.
Yeah.
If I stop identifying with every gust of anxiety, does that mean I stop taking action? How is this attention different from just avoiding things?
That's a crucial question. And attention, in this context, is the complete opposite of avoidance. It means being fully present with what is happening, without identifying with it. Think of the metaphor from the mindfulness research. Thoughts and emotions are like birds flying through the sky. You are not the birds. You are the vast, expansive sky that simply holds whatever appears.
But modern life teaches us to be the weather, though. We identify with every storm. We say, I am stressed, not a feeling of stress is moving through me.
And that identification is the trap. The moment you say, I am the stress, you then have to spend all your energy either suppressing it or desperately fixing the external world that you think caused it. It's an exhausting, continuous project. But if anxiety is simply a wave moving through the ocean of your awareness, you can watch it rise and crest and fall without feeling the need to drown in it or, frantically paddle away. That distinction is liberation.
Okay, let's talk about the armor. Our roles, our achievements, being the reliable one or the perfectionist or the problem solver, those are our strongest pieces of armor. What happens when someone stops using their roles as proof that they're worthy?
That is the moment of genuine courage. The ego clings to those roles because they provide evidence of a solid I. If I am the reliable one, then I exist. If I stop being reliable, then who am I? When we dare to just sit with the underlying vulnerability, the loneliness, the exhaustion, the fear of judgment that lives beneath that armor, a profound shift happens.
And that's the alchemy you mentioned earlier. How does that happen?
It happens through insight, what in some traditions is called vipassana. When we stop identifying with emotions and instead allow them to just be felt in the body without immediately telling a story about them, they stop being problems. They start being teachers.
Can you give me a clear, actionable example of that transformation from the material?
Absolutely. Take anxiety. When you observe it without judgment, anxiety often reveals itself as unspoken care. It's not a flaw. It's deep caring for an outcome or for another person. Grief, which we try so hard to run from, transforms into love with nowhere to go. It's the raw energy of connection that has lost its object. Even shame, that really isolating emotion, when you can hold it gently, it reveals itself as a primal call for connection, a deep need for belonging. We're learning to translate the language of the body, which the ego had previously labeled as enemy fire.
That is a fundamental reframing. So for the listener who's feeling that urge to flee into a distraction right now, how do they anchor themselves? What is the practical step?
The path always begins with the simple act of pausing and using the breath as an anchor, but not as a tool to force calm. We have to let go of that goal. It's simply a reliable anchor to feel what is present right now. Just place your hand on your body, maybe your belly or your chest. Feel the breath breathe itself. Let the emotion be there too. Don't engage it. Don't push it away. Just hold it like the sky holds the weather. This simple pause creates the space for insight.
So presence isn't passive. It's actually the most active form of courage in a world that just rewards performance and motion over meaning and authenticity. It's an act of profound self-reclamation.
It really is. And once you begin this work of disidentification, the journey deepens. It leads us to the most radical insight in these texts.
Right, that expectation of finding a fixed self. I think most people are looking for that. We want to find the core, stable, calm center inside of us.
Yeah.
But you're suggesting that very expectation is where the radical insight is. Why is that?
Because what if the stable, fixed self you're trying to find, or even the solid I you were trying to be with, isn't a fixed thing at all? This is the quiet explosion at the heart of the inquiry we see across Eastern philosophy and even modern neurobiology.
That sounds unsettling for a listener who's seeking stability. Are you suggesting we have no self at all?
Not that we have nothing, but that the structure is radically different from what the ego imagines. This is the teaching of anatta, or not self. When you look really closely at your experience, at the thoughts, the sensations, the emotions, you realize the self is not a solid, unchanging core. It's a dynamic, ever-shifting process. It's a constellation of mental formations that constantly combine and dissolve. It's like a flowing river, not a static monument.
So the boundary between me and the world was never actually solid to begin with. It was always just a story we told ourselves.
A profoundly useful operational fiction, yes, but not the ultimate truth of your awareness. The deeper silence reveals the immense relief in this realization. There was never a separate, fixed you that needed fixing or defending or perpetually maintaining. That exhausting 24/7 project of self-maintenance, the tyranny of always feeling like we should be something else or better than we are, that is what finally drops away.
That is genuine freedom. Freedom from the internal tyrant of shoulds.
And when the mind is contracted and identifies with the ego, an emotion is like a drop of ink in a small glass of water. It stains everything. But in the vast ocean of open awareness that realizes the dynamic nature of self, that same emotion disperses. It calms the whole experience without corrupting it. Emotions cease to be existential threats because there is no fixed self for them to destroy.
Sounds like we're being invited to surrender the steering wheel, to let life unfold without the constant micromanagement of the ego.
That's the core Zen insight. True presence is letting life live you without the filter of a separate me constantly trying to control the ship. The invitation is radical and it cuts through all the busyness. Stop trying to be anyone at all.
And when we finally stop, when we find that stillness and realize the self is dynamic, the inevitable practical question comes up. What do I do now? How do I navigate my busy life if I stop performing?
The answer that's whispered by life itself, once that performance anxiety dissolves, is paradoxical. Nothing, and yet, everything.
Everything.
Yes, because in this open space where the frantic need to prove yourself is gone and only presence remains, that is where true creativity, genuine compassion, and authentic action are born. Not from a reactive need to achieve, but from a deep, non-reactive resonance with what is truly necessary in the moment. The silence you feared was never empty, it was full of potential.
That's a profound shift in perspective. So, your challenge for yourself today for this radical act of pausing is to choose stillness over escape, even if it's just for a single breath, anchored in your body. And just notice what arises without labeling it good or bad.
Give yourself the permission to rest. Not because you've earned it through exhaustion, but because in that pause, you reclaim the ground of your own being.
And trust that in that stillness, you are reclaiming everything. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.